This happened to me about a year ago, and it's something I think about almost every single night before I fall asleep. I'm 26 now. At the time, I had just signed a lease on a small one-story rental house on the quieter side of town. It wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living room that doubled as everything else. The whole place was maybe 900 square feet, but it was mine. And after 3 years of splitting a loud, filthy apartment with 2 roommates who never cleaned anything, having my own space felt like a luxury. The house sat on a dead-end street with maybe 6 other homes on it. Most of my neighbors were older couples or families who kept to themselves. The backyard wasn't fenced, just a small concrete patio that bled into a stretch of grass that eventually met a thick row of hedges separating my property from the one behind it. Past those hedges was another street, but you couldn't really see it unless you walked all the way to the back and pushed through the branches. The point is, the back of the house felt private. Almost too private, honestly. There were no streetlights back there, and once the sun went down, the yard was just this wall of black outside the kitchen window. The back door was in the kitchen. It was one of those old wooden doors with a single deadbolt and a knob lock. Nothing fancy. The deadbolt was the kind you turn from the inside, and it had a keyhole on the outside. When I moved in, the landlord gave me 2 keys for it. I put one on my key ring and tossed the spare in my nightstand drawer. I made a habit of locking that deadbolt every night before bed. It was part of my routine. Brush teeth, check the front door, check the back door, turn off the lights. Every single night. The first few weeks in the house were great. I set up my desk in the spare bedroom, started a new remote job, and fell into a rhythm that actually made me feel like a functioning adult for once. I cooked dinner most nights, watched whatever was on TV, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. It was boring in the best possible way. I don't remember the exact night it first happened, but it was sometime around mid-October. I woke up on a Saturday morning, walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and noticed the back door was unlocked. The deadbolt was in the open position. I remember standing there for a second, staring at it, trying to think back to the night before. Had I forgotten to lock it? I was pretty sure I hadn't, but I'd also had a couple beers that Friday night, so I figured maybe I just spaced out. I locked it, made my coffee, and didn't think about it again. A few days later, same thing. I came into the kitchen in the morning and the deadbolt was unlocked. This time I was certain I had locked it. I specifically remembered turning it the night before because I had to jiggle the handle to make sure it caught. The lock was a little stiff, and you had to push the door in slightly while turning the bolt, or it wouldn't fully engage. I remembered doing that, but there it was, sitting in the unlocked position like I'd never touched it. I chalked it up to the lock being old and unreliable. Maybe the bolt wasn't catching properly and was sliding back on its own. It was an old house with old hardware, and I figured the mechanism was just worn out. I told myself I'd mention it to my landlord eventually, but I wasn't in any rush. I started double-checking it before bed, giving it an extra push after turning it. That seemed to work for a while. About a week later, I decided to test my own memory. Before going to bed that night, I locked the back door the way I always did, but this time, I stood there for a full 10 seconds staring at the deadbolt after I turned it, making absolutely sure the bolt was fully extended into the frame. I even tugged the door handle twice to confirm it wouldn't budge. I remember thinking to myself as I walked to my bedroom that there was no possible way I could wake up tomorrow and question whether I locked that door. I had just done it with more intention and focus than I had ever done anything in my life. The next morning, it was unlocked. I stood in the kitchen staring at it for a long time. There was no rationalizing it this time. I had locked that door. I knew I had. But the bolt was sitting in the open position like I'd never touched it. I spent the next hour inspecting the lock. I crouched down and looked at the bolt, the strike plate, the door frame. Everything seemed fine. The bolt extended fully into the frame when I turned it. There was no visible damage, no sign that anything was broken or worn down. I locked and unlocked it about 15 times in a row, and every single time the bolt held. It didn't slide back, it didn't slip. It worked exactly the way a deadbolt is supposed to work. I couldn't figure it out. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention to other things in the house. Not because I thought someone was breaking in. That thought hadn't even crossed my mind yet. I just had this low-level unease that I couldn't shake, like something was off, but I didn't know what. And that's when I started noticing the small stuff. One morning, a kitchen chair was pulled out slightly from the table. Not a lot, maybe 2 inches, but I live alone and I always push my chairs in. It's one of those habits I picked up from my mom that I never shook. I stared at it for a second, then pushed it back in and moved on. A couple days after that, I found a cabinet door open, the one above the sink where I keep the glasses. It was only open a crack, maybe an inch, but it caught my eye because I never leave cabinets open. I closed it and told myself maybe I just hadn't pushed it all the way shut the last time I used it. Then the bathroom towel. I always hang my towel on the hook behind the bathroom door. One morning, it was draped over the edge of the tub instead. I stood in the doorway looking at it, trying to remember if I'd moved it the night before. I hadn't. I was sure of it. But I also couldn't think of a reason why anyone else would have moved it, so I just hung it back up and tried to forget about it. I know how this sounds. A chair, a cabinet, a towel. None of these things are scary on their own. But when you live alone and you know your own patterns, even tiny disruptions start to feel wrong. It's not the thing itself that bothers you. It's the fact that you can't explain it. Your brain starts running through possibilities, and when none of them make sense, that's when the unease really sets in. I didn't tell anyone about any of this. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I was a grown man living alone for the first time, and I figured admitting that a moved chair was keeping me up at night would make me sound ridiculous. It was a Thursday night, maybe 2 weeks after the towel incident, when I noticed something that finally broke through my denial. I had just gotten home from the grocery store and was putting things away in the fridge. As I was rearranging some stuff on the top shelf, I realized that a container of leftover pasta I'd made 2 days earlier was gone. Not empty, not in the sink, just gone. The container itself, the lid, all of it. It had been in the fridge that morning when I grabbed the milk for my cereal. I was positive. I searched the entire kitchen. I checked the trash, the dishwasher, the counter, the cabinets. Nothing. The container had just vanished. I stood in the middle of the kitchen for a long time after that. I wasn't scared exactly. I was confused in a way that bordered on nauseous. The missing food forced me to confront something I had been actively avoiding. Someone was coming into my house. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat on the couch in the living room with every light in the house turned on and my phone in my hand. I kept looking down the hallway toward the kitchen, waiting for something, but nothing happened. Around 3 a.m., I finally got up and checked the back door. It was unlocked. I locked it, dragged a kitchen chair over, and wedged it under the doorknob. Then I went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, the chair was still in place and the door was still locked. That small victory made me feel slightly better, but it didn't last. After work that day, I drove to the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt, a heavy-duty one with a reinforced strike plate and longer screws. I also bought a cheap security camera, the kind you stick to a shelf and connect to your phone. I replaced the deadbolt that evening, installed the camera on the kitchen counter facing the back door, and felt like I had finally taken control of the situation. I tested the new lock about 20 times. It was solid. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The camera was recording. The new lock was secure. Everything felt handled. In the morning, I made coffee and checked the camera footage on my phone. I scrubbed through the entire night. 8 hours of footage showing absolutely nothing, just my dark, empty kitchen. The back door didn't move. The lock didn't turn. Nothing happened. I felt relieved. This went on for about 5 days. Every morning, I checked the footage. Every morning, nothing. The back door stayed locked. No chairs moved. No food disappeared. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the lock really had been faulty. Maybe I'd eaten the pasta and forgotten. Maybe I was just stressed from the new job and the new living situation, and my brain had been filling in gaps with nonsense. On the 6th morning, I woke up and went through the routine. Coffee, phone, camera app. I opened the footage and started scrubbing through it. Nothing for the first few hours. I was about to close the app when something caught my eye around the 4 a.m. mark. A light. Just a brief, faint glow on the far side of the kitchen, near the hallway entrance. It lasted maybe 2 seconds and then disappeared. I rewound and watched it again. The light wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside the house, from the hallway, like someone had briefly turned on a phone screen or a small flashlight and then turned it off. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone screen. I rewound it 5 more times. The glow was there every time, faint, brief, unmistakable. Someone had been standing in the hallway of my house at 4 in the morning while I was asleep 30 feet away. My hands were shaking. I went through the rest of the footage frame by frame, but the light didn't appear again. The back door never opened. Whoever had been in the hallway hadn't come in through the back door that night, which meant one of 2 things. Either they had come in through a different entry point, or they had already been inside the house before I went to bed. I called the police. 2 officers showed up about 40 minutes later. I showed them the footage and explained everything. The unlocking door, the moved objects, the missing food, the camera. They were polite, but I could tell they weren't exactly taking it as seriously as I needed them to. One of them checked the back door, the front door, and all the windows. Everything was locked. No sign of forced entry. He said sometimes cameras pick up weird reflections and artifacts, especially cheap ones. He suggested I get a better security system and to call again if something more concrete happened. Then they left. That night, I moved the camera from the kitchen to the hallway. I pointed it straight down the hall so it could see the kitchen entrance on one end and my bedroom door on the other. I locked the back door, checked every window, and went to bed with the bedroom door locked for the first time since I'd moved in. I also put a glass on the floor right inside the back door. If someone opened it, the door would knock the glass over and I'd hear it. I barely slept. Every creak of the house jolted me awake. I must have checked the live camera feed on my phone a dozen times throughout the night. Every time the hallway was empty. When my alarm went off at 7 a.m., the first thing I did was check the back door. Locked. I looked down. The glass was exactly where I left it. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then I checked the camera footage. At 3:47 a.m., my bedroom door opened. From the inside. I watched myself on camera, or what I thought was myself, step into the hallway in the dark. Except I don't sleepwalk. I've never sleepwalked in my life. And the figure on camera wasn't moving like someone who was asleep. They moved slowly and deliberately, turning their head to look directly at the camera before walking toward the kitchen and disappearing out of frame. 13 minutes later, the figure walked back down the hallway, opened my bedroom door, and went back inside. I played it back. I paused it on the frame where the figure looked at the camera. Even in the grainy night vision footage, I could see enough. The build was wrong. The height was wrong. The person on that screen was not me. Someone had been inside my bedroom, with me, while I slept. They had walked out, spent 13 minutes in my kitchen, and then walked back into my room. I don't remember the next few minutes very clearly. I think I threw up. I know I called the police again. This time they took it more seriously. They dusted for prints, checked the back door lock, checked all the windows again. They found scuff marks on the outside of the back door frame near the bottom, like someone had been prying at the weather stripping. They also found faint scratches around the old deadbolt holes that the new hardware didn't fully cover, marks consistent with a lockpick or a bump key. One of the officers told me that when you install a new deadbolt into the same door without filling and reinforcing the old holes first, the surrounding wood is already compromised. He said someone with the right tools could exploit that weakness in under a minute. But the thing that really disturbed the officers was the bedroom closet. When they searched the house, one of them opened my closet door and stopped. He called his partner over. I stood in the doorway while the two of them crouched down and shined their flashlights into the back corner. Behind my hanging clothes, pushed against the wall, was a folded blanket and an empty water bottle. Neither of those things belonged to me. Someone had been hiding in my closet, not just that night. The carpet beneath the blanket was flattened and discolored in a way that doesn't happen from a single use. One of the officers said it looked like someone had been sitting or lying in that same spot repeatedly over the course of several weeks. That person had been entering through the back door, spending time in my house, and retreating into my closet before I woke up. The door unlocking itself was never the lock failing. It was someone unlocking it from the inside, leaving through the back, and coming back later. The only reason I ever noticed the unlocked door in the mornings was because sometimes they were leaving after I woke up, not before. I moved out that day. I didn't take most of my stuff. I drove to my parents' house 40 minutes away and didn't come back for 3 weeks. When I finally did return with my dad to pack everything up, the house looked exactly how I left it, except for one thing. The back door was unlocked. While we were packing, I opened my nightstand drawer to grab some personal stuff. The spare back door key I had tossed in there when I first moved in was gone. The police never identified anyone. There were no usable fingerprints besides mine. The camera footage was too grainy for facial identification. My landlord replaced all the locks and claimed he had no idea who might have had access to spare keys from previous tenants. I never found out how that person originally got in, how long they'd been doing it before I noticed, or what they did during those 13 minutes in my kitchen while I slept one room away. But I do know that at some point, someone went through my nightstand while I was asleep and took the only other key to my back door. What still keeps me up at night isn't the closet blanket or the camera footage, or even the fact that someone stood in my hallway at 4 a.m. and looked directly into the lens. It's the towel, the chair, the cabinet, all those tiny things I noticed and dismissed weeks before I bought the camera. Because if that person had been hiding in my closet for weeks before I ever caught the light on camera, that means they were already there the very first morning I found the back door unlocked. They were there every single time. Every night I brushed my teeth and climbed into bed and closed my eyes. Someone was standing 3 feet away from me in the dark, breathing, waiting, watching me fall asleep. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know why they chose me. And the thing I really can't stop thinking about is that water bottle I never bought, sitting in the corner of a closet I opened every single morning to grab a shirt and somehow never once looked down far enough to see.